Hello again, I'm your host, Yona, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the most interesting and friendly SCPs in existence. The SCP Foundation is known for its collection of mysterious and terrifying beings, locations, and objects. It is so well known for these things that sometimes the more wholesome creations are forgotten or written off altogether. But make no mistake, there is sunshine and rainbows in the SCP universe as well. You just have to look a little harder to find it. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some of my favorite heartwarming SCPs, starting with arguably the most popular one, SCP-999, titled The Tickle Monster. SCP-999 is a safe class object which appears to be a large gelatinous mass of translucent orange slime. It is able to change its size and shape at will, but when resting it takes the shape of a small dome. The SCP is playful, acting almost dog-like when approached, and it is not uncommon for it to hug, nuzzle, and bounce around the nearest person it can find, all while emitting high-pitched cooing noises. Contact with the SCP causes an immediate burst of pure happiness, which only increases the longer the contact is maintained and lasts long after the contact is broken. SCP-999's favorite activity is tickle wrestling, hence its title, and it will often do this by completely enveloping the subject from their neck down and tickling them until they ask it to stop. SCP-999 will often seek out people who are unhappy or hurt, and the effects it has on these sad individuals has prompted the Foundation to look into making antidepressants from the SCP's slime. The SCP cares so much for other living creatures that it refuses to eat meat, and has even jumped in front of someone to take a bullet for them. Even SCP-682, a hateful and indestructible reptile who practically lives to kill, laughed itself to sleep when exposed to 999. When the Foundation removed SCP-999, the reptile broke containment and went on a killing spree, but that's a story for another time. Next up, we have SCP-348, titled A Gift from Dad. This SCP isn't as well known as 999, but then again, that's why I'm making this video. SCP-348 is another safe class object, as most wholesome SCPs are. It is a white ceramic bowl with light blue flowers, and the words "thinking of you" in Chinese are etched inside. When in the presence of someone who has a minor ailment or injury, such as a cough, cut, or runny nose, the SCP will fill with soup. The flavor of the soup varies, but subjects between 4 and 18 consistently state that they enjoyed the meal, and will finish the soup if allowed. Children who eat from the bowl on multiple occasions express a feeling of contentment, saying that even though they're eating by themselves, they do not feel lonely. Occasionally, after the soup has been consumed, a message will materialize inside the bowl. After several hours, the words will disappear. Here are a few of the messages recorded by the Foundation. Subject: a 10-year-old male who bruised himself while biking, who lives with his parents and frequently argues with them. Message: don't forget to brush. Subject: a 7-year-old female with a light cough whose father passed away in a car accident. Message: I love you. Subject: an 11-year-old male with a slight cold living with his foster parents. Message: I'm glad you're happy. Messages like this also appear to adults, although they seem to enjoy the meal less, saying that, quote, something is missing. On one occasion, when served to a 40-year-old male who had murdered his father a year prior, the subject refused to finish the soup, complaining about stomach pains and the taste. Later, when the soup was poured out, the bowl immediately filled with salt water, which remained for 3 hours. Finally, one time, a 60-year-old man suffering from a terminal illness was given SCP-348. He claimed its contents were the best he'd ever tasted, and noted that his pain had faded. He passed away peacefully a week later. Next up, we have SCP-2295, which is perhaps the most wholesome SCP I have ever read about. Titled The Bear with a Heart of Patchwork. This SCP is a stuffed toy bear with a small heart pin on its chest and a bow wrapped around its neck. SCP-2295 enters an active state when it comes within 2 meters of a human who has sustained a major injury to one of their organs. If more than one injured human is present, the SCP will always choose the younger of the 2 or more subjects. The SCP will anonymously produce scissors, thread, and either sewing needles or crocheting hook, and it will begin to make a patchwork copy of the subject's organ using any fabric and stuffing it can find in the area around it, or, if no usable materials can be found, it will use fabric and stuffing from itself. Despite all odds, these organs work perfectly. On one occasion, there was an 18-year-old subject that SCP-2295 could not save. When the SCP realized this, it gave the subject a king-sized candy bar and embraced them while anonymously producing a tear-like solution from its eyes. Finally, a rare Wholesome Keter-class SCP, SCP-4999, titled Someone to Watch Over Us. SCP-4999 is a humanoid entity of unknown origins whose physical appearance varies, although it does always appear wearing dark formal wear. SCP-4999 will only appear to subjects on their deathbeds who are awake and alone. It is also more likely to appear to subjects who are non-religious, homeless, living in poverty, mentally ill, veterans, non-violent criminals or people with no criminal record, and people who are just overall unremarkable or insignificant. Upon manifestation, the entity will seat itself next to the subject's bed. If no seating is available, it will stand or sit on the floor. Once settled, it will light a cigarette for itself and offer one to the subject. If the subject accepts, it will place a cigarette between their lips and light it. Otherwise, it will put the cigarettes away. Following this, it will hold the subject's hand in silence until they have passed away, at which point it will vanish, the leftover cigarette being the only indicator that it was ever there in the first place. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Please consider subscribing for more content and liking/sharing this video to help the channel grow. I'll see you next time, and as usual, thank you for watching.